Thank you. It is so exciting to be here. I wanted to talk to you about making great work. Not just making great work, but what you need as a creative leader to really make great work happen. Because I have a belief that as creative individuals, we have the vision, we have the power to set the future for others to follow. So there's this great quote, "We're the music makers and we're the dreamers of the dreams," which obviously is not any sort of part of popular culture, but it comes from a poem by a brilliant Irish poet called Arthur O'Shaughnessy. And Arthur O'Shaughnessy, when he's talking about we're the music makers, we're the dreamers of the dreams, he's saying, like us as creative people, we can see things and we can do things and we have a vision maybe that other people don't. And so we have this incredible power. But with incredible power, and this kind of capability, we have a responsibility as well, I believe, to change the status quo. We have a responsibility not just to use our creativity for a little bit of fun or to sell things, but like to really make an impact in culture. And because I have that belief, and I hope you all do too, it's why I'm passionate about setting up organizations and starting things to solve problems in our industry and beyond creatively. So I'm a co-founder of She Says. She Says has been going 13 years. We're over 60,000 members. It is an organization to encourage more women to get into the creative industry specifically. We're in 55 different cities around the world in over 40 countries. Papillon Canetta, I didn't found, but I am a founding member of. It was started by a 28-year-old Brazilian guy who just mailed all of these amazing ECDs around the world, who he knew cared about making the world a better place. And we all work pro bono on projects together around the world. So we've done projects in the favelas in Brazil, but we've also done work. The plastic bags in New York just got banned, which is great because we did a whole piece of work on banning plastic bags and sort of working with bodegas to make that happen in a really great way. We've also worked with young trans people of color in New York. We've worked with people with severe physical disabilities in London to sort of create a creative platform that allows people to understand and interact in a safe way with all of the questions that otherwise they'd be too uncomfortable to ask someone who might be severely disabled. I was also a co-founder of the Great British Diversity Experiment. That is the largest practical experiment done in the UK on why diverse teams make better work, and also what holds those teams back. What kind of leadership do you need to actually get the most out of your diverse teams? The very interesting thing that we found is the teams that were working on, so it was a brief set by Tesco, a big supermarket in the UK. The teams that had leaders who had, I guess, what traditionally is seen as soft qualities. They listened more than they spoke. They supported more than they led. It's a very different way of leadership, creative leadership, to what we are all used to seeing as being great in the industry. Those are the teams that had the best work, far and away. And actually, with the diverse teams, that traditional top-down command and control type creative leadership, the teams just didn't cohere, they fell apart. So that was a very interesting piece of research. I'm also a founder of the House Foundations, which is a school which is being set up in London at the moment to help underprivileged young people, putting them through a 12-week program to get them into work through house music. And also a founder of Can't, which is a festival for people that can't go to Cannes. Because that happens, it runs in London, but it also actually runs quite a lot through Eastern Europe, where people can't afford to go to Cannes. It's expensive and it's elitist, and it's really blind of us to say otherwise. So also why I founded Mr. President. So Mr. President we founded 7 years ago. Specifically, I was sick of making shit to add to the world of shit. There's so much rubbish out there. We make so much stuff now in our industry. So much of it is of poor quality. So at Mr. President, we want to act more like, I guess, a president, and less like a marketer, and really try to change the world and leave a legacy with the work that we do. But I wanted to talk to you about creativity. So you can't measure creativity. This is what we are told all the time. You can, but it's more complicated. So as I said, instead, we just make shit to add to the world of shit. And all of you, I'm sure, have kind of done it, had a brief in front of you that is of no, has no creative impact on me, isn't going to do anything for the client, and the audience doesn't give a shit about it. They're not even going to look at it. And there's so much of that work out there because it's really easy to measure, right? A lot of it exists in the digital space, but it's easy to measure bad work. But what happens is we end up destroying those great ideas because they don't fit, because they're harder, because it's more of a struggle to get to, because there's more discussion around a great idea, because it could be controversial, or if some people love something, it means some people will hate something, and that's a much more difficult piece of work to get out the door. And it's very easy to focus on the wrong stuff, as I said, like measurement, rather than really what that power of creativity is. So I really feel like we need to evolve, and we need to liberate ourselves to be leading in this space. Frederick and I were talking about the good old days, but 10 years ago in the digital space, agencies here like Boondoggle, for example, Erwin Jansen, who's coming today, they were doing the coolest fucking work on the planet, right? When the baby elephant was born, and that was streamed live, that was super, super, super cool, and really cutting edge, and really difficult to get across the line because no one knew what was going to happen to the elephant before it was born. I was here when it was born. It was super exciting. But that work is hard, and I think it's not that we've become lazy, but I think we have relied too much on the machine that exists around us and not enough on creativity. So when I am working on creative projects, the first thing I think of, and we do this at Mr. President, is what's that magic nugget? So what is the little nugget of the idea where if you lost it, it would just become really boring? It could be a particular photographer. It could be, a really clever piece of tech. It could be a really beautiful big idea. It could be, but you need to define what the magic in the idea is first, so you can protect it. And so at Mr. President, actually, as part of our process, we sit together and we actually say, this is what our magic nugget is for this piece of work. And everyone knows it, and everyone knows to protect it in every client meeting and every internal meeting to make sure that thing stays alive through the process. The second point is sometimes it is the process and not the strategy. I was very kind of fortunate. It sounds a bit wanky, but I met Damien Kulash from OKGo a few years ago, and he said to me, your industry is totally crazy. You plan everything out so much, and the strategy is so tight, and then the idea is so tight, and then the storyboard is so tight, and you even say, I'm having a vase in the left-hand corner, and the woman's going to wear blue, and blah, blah, blah. And then you spend a lot of money in a very expensive studio in a short period of time, and you get out exactly what you put in. He said, there's no space for magic to happen, for synchronicity to happen anymore. He said the way that they work with OKGo is that they hire a very cheap space for a month, and they all go in there with all of their stuff, and they play. And as they're playing, they're finding all of these magic things and going, oh, actually, that works well with that. Their videos couldn't be more synchronized and more beautiful and more polished in a way, but it comes from play and a place of creativity, and not from planning everything out before you actually do it. The next point is just this idea of the power of things that don't fit. It's very, very easy to kill things because they don't quite fit the brief, or someone's not sort of quite sure whether it's the right thing to be saying, but it's obviously often those magic moments, and Rory Sutherland talks about it in his book, Alchemy, all the time. It's those moments that feel like they don't fit, which are often the things that make the work wonderful. The fourth is just to lean into being uncomfortable, because no great piece of work has ever happened without an awful lot of discomfort. Great work is not plain sailing. It's great if you've got a good team around you, and I'll talk about that later, but you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then the final one is no bullshit. We have, quite strict rules, I would say, at Mr. President about, you don't have meetings about meetings. If you don't need to be in a meeting and you don't know why you're there, leave. We keep things fast and lean, and I would say agile, which comes from the digital space, but we do that by just being really honest with each other about who really needs to do what, when, and giving each other a lot of trust. And that really, I guess, the conditions to what I call, letting nothing getting in the way of a great idea. But there are some specific points around, I guess, diversity, inclusion, and teamwork and leadership that I just wanted to share with you. And I'll share it by talking about some work. So the first one is empathy. So what is right for someone isn't right for everyone, as we know. But it's really important to challenge your own perspective and embrace design thinking, even if you're doing traditional advertising. So, design thinking is coming from a place of understanding who the audience is and bringing them into the process in some way to make sure that what you're doing is really talking to the audience in an authentic way and not stereotyping. And I think focus groups, that's kind of how we've done it in the past. They're not really good enough. So I'm going to talk to you about a piece of work where I actually had a really interesting challenge around empathy. So Come Out for LGBT is our big brand platform for Stonewall, which is the biggest UK LGBT+ charity in the UK. When we were developing this new platform for them, we tried all sorts of different things. When we won the pitch, the entire team was LGBT+. So the entire team at Mr. President, which was great because we got on with Stonewall really well. Again, their entire team in the charity is LGBT+. And there was a real connection there. When we tried to find a message that worked for allies, for people in the world that are maybe broadly accepting of LGBT+ people but haven't stood up and said so yet, we found that all of the ideas that our teams were having just didn't work with that audience at all. They were too fighty, they were too powerful. And what we found by bringing allies into the process of sort of designing the big idea is that scared them. This idea of going out there and fighting and being really, it really put people off. They thought, God, you're asking a lot of me, and I haven't done anything yet, and I'm not sure what to do, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do the right thing. So we actually brought allies both into the design process, but then also brought some allied teams into the creative process as well from Mr. President to get to Come Out for LGBT. Now that seemed like a very simple, big idea, but actually for people who are LGBT+, and for Stonewall, this was quite controversial because the words come out. They were very scared that they were encouraging people who didn't want to come out, and that's a very loaded issue, and there are a lot of people within the communities that have had very bad experiences coming out. And so this, crazily, now, took so much to sell into Stonewall because they were so nervous about what they were saying. But because we had the backing of that design thinking and the allies, and the people on our team who just went, well, this is just a very simple shortcut to you're asking me to stand up and do something. And it feels simple, it feels like something I could put on a hashtag and use on Twitter, and that could be the start of my journey. Because we had all of that backing, it was much easier for Stonewall to take on board. And it has done so well for them. So we're actually into the 4th year now of Come Out for LGBT. The other wonderful thing that we did was we actually used some of these allies and really unusual people and people who were respected within groups in society who maybe have a stereotype of LGBT people already. So this is, I keep calling him Colonel Sanders. General Sanders, he's the 3rd highest ranking army official in the UK with a gay sergeant. We had people from the world of football, so Come Out playing. And I'll play you the little video, but we also looked at all of these other groups where the communities aren't represented and you don't usually see yourself. So people of colour, sort of urban youth, people in rural areas, people with working class jobs, and removing that stereotype of LGBT plus people that you see all the time of glitter and pride and rainbows, and trying to talk in a much more authentic way. It's a very simple film, but the lovely thing, I don't know, any of you gamers at all? Do you recognize Tracer? You might not have recognized Tracer. She's the first openly LGBT character in a video game. And by putting her in the film, I did a talk talking about Stonewall about 6 months ago, and someone actually came up to me crying afterwards, going like, "You've seen me." No one really recognizes that just because I'm a kind of a geeky gamer, actually I'm also part of this community, and it really talks to intersectionality in a way that's really powerful. The next thing that we've done with them, which is super exciting, is Amazon are an equality partner with Stonewall. So when I was saying when we did the research, a lot of the reason why people don't speak up is because they're worried about what to say, particularly around trans rights. So particularly, things like pronouns, etc. Will I get it wrong? Sometimes that's an excuse, but oftentimes it's a genuine question. And whereas you can go onto the internet and find information, it's not very warm. It's not very emotional in the way that using speech is. So we created a skill for Alexa where we crowdsource. And the website is still up there. You can put in, if you've got questions, you put your questions into the website. Stone will take those questions, answer them properly, and then we put them into the skill. So it's an ever-developing resource for people who might not know anyone who's LGBT+, might definitely not know anyone who's trans, or they might not know that they know someone who's trans, but really wants to understand so that they can be a better ally. The wonderful thing about Stonewall is, about Amazon, is they've also given us access to their core commands. So without having to open a skill, if you say to Alexa in the UK, which happens a lot when people first buy their Alexa, annoyingly, Alexa, am I gay? Alexa, are my friends gay? It now says, well, look, only you know the answer to that question, but come to Stonewall and we can help. And this is the most recent stuff that we're doing, is actually working with them to celebrate 30 years of Stonewall by showing the legislation that they've helped to overturn. So really horrible legislation. This is about not being able to promote LGBT families at schools at all, or even actually have a conversation about anything to do with LGBT, which was a law that was passed 30 years ago, and it was repealed in 2003 specifically because of Stonewall's commitment. Or the fact that until 2003 you could still be fired, and 2008 if you were trans. The second point is that data is amazing, and I come from a digital background and I love data, but only if you know how to use it well. And I think if you know how to use it well, it can be absolutely magical, because data isn't just good for measurement. It's the most brilliant insight tool if you have someone creative there to find what that insight is. And I'm just going to show you a piece of work that we did for FreeSat, which is sort of a free, it's like Sky TV. I don't know what you have in Belgium, but it's like a kind of a Sky TV, but it's free. It is an amazing product. It's absolutely phenomenal. In fact, it is sort of unbelievably good. Loads of channels, all the functionality you have on Sky, amazing customer service, really good technology. They always come out top on NPR in terms of how much people absolutely love them. And yet their advertising was really, really boring. It was very much like all the other TV advertising you see, like, now you can stop and rewind and blah, 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 and see your favorite football on blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't getting them anywhere because no one knew really who they were, and it didn't look trustworthy enough. But when we delved into the data really deeply around FreeSat, we found something really interesting. And because we've got a really great creative data analyst, he was able to put it to the creative teams in such a great way that it got us all excited. What he said was, everyone hates Sky. Everyone hates them. If you go into social media, if you do social media listening, if you're using Sysomos or whatever it is that you might be using, everyone hates Sky all the time. No one leaves Sky. They don't leave Sky because the football's on next weekend, or the grandma's coming to stay, or it's Christmas and I have to show, films to the kids, or they've just given me a discount because I've called up and complained. So it's almost like this addictive behavior, like you're addicted to a drug or to smoking or something. And then he looked at people who had just switched from Sky to FreeSat and found that they were so evangelical about FreeSat, like, oh my God, this is the best, I can't believe it. It really was like someone who'd been a heroin addict and then had given up heroin and is suddenly trying to get everyone else to give up heroin too, this evangelical emotion. And what was interesting is when people started to effuse like that, other people listened, and it actually, you could see in the data this trail of people starting to pick up FreeSat from these crazy people. So all we did in terms of the advertising was take real crazy things that people said about FreeSat on Twitter and turn it into an ad.
Switching to FreeSat is the greatest thing I've ever done.
Really?
I choose FreeSat over my own children.
Steady now. Hey!
FreeSat saved our marriage.
OK, with over 200 channels to watch and record, no subscription fee, plus catch-up and on-demand, it's no wonder our customers love us so much. FreeSat, unbelievably good.
But we've had so much fun with this. So FreeSat saved our marriage. Whoa there, buddy. We know those Netflix and chill sessions helped, but it was probably that 3-course dinner you made that really saved the day. And because it's really fun, it's allowing us to do some really fun things as well in social. So this is Stuart. He's complaining about Sky. So why is Sky Original Bundle advertised at £20 when I'm paying £22? We're able to jump in, say, hidden fees making you feel blue. How about 200 channels, blah, 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 unbelievably good. Can you record on the FreeSat box? Absolutely, you can record. It sounds great. I think it's time to cancel Sky. We think so too, Stuart. No one needs sky-high prices. Here's how you can get unbelievably good TV. Stuart loves FreeSat. And then what was brilliant was a little while afterwards, Sky Help team came in and said, sorry for the late reply, Stuart. However, have you managed to get everything sorted? We're like, we've already got the customer. But, finding that magic in the data and playing with it it's really powerful. The next one is that diversity is no CSR initiative, and I think we have to stop thinking of diversity inclusion as something that we have to have in the agency because someone told us to, and realize that diversity is the only place that creativity comes from, right? Being creative is taking one thing and another thing and smashing them together to make something new. And if everyone comes from the same place, that's a very small pool of things to smash together, right? So diversity is creativity. I'm going to show a piece of work. You may have seen it because it's been everywhere apart from the US, for herbal essences. So herbal essences are a little bit of an old brand, and we were asked to breathe some more life into it. The wonderful story about this piece of work is, so I, on my team, have a young woman who I've mentored for quite a few years, who is a foster kid. She has had a very, very, very difficult life, and because she's had a very, very difficult life, has a lot of very complex problems. She won a Black Pencil for copywriting when she was a student. She's amazing, but she wouldn't mind me calling her feral. She's like totally crazy, and she's had a lot of issues with drugs and alcohol and what have you. It was quite scary in a way for us as a small agency to bring her on board because it felt dangerous and it felt like something that we didn't know. So we went out and we got ourselves, trained in how to look after people who might have drug and alcohol addiction and what have you. And she's doing brilliantly, by the way. But because we believed in her creativity, and we knew that having someone from that point of view, from like, a class in society that never really makes it into advertising, and a voice, we would find something different. And so this was a pitch actually we did against Grey and won. And the reason that we won was because her sassiness and her like grit and her attitude made this work something that otherwise we wouldn't have had. So, everything in the film is her tone of voice as this like young, like underprivileged, crazy, like woman, but done so beautifully. So I know it doesn't seem like very much, but just even having a more feisty picture rather than the usual like flowy hair, lovely light kind of thing was a real challenge for P&G. They found this quite a challenging image, which is great and interesting.
Wild and free, tell the world we run the show. Rise it real high with the super south flow.
Flaunt the hair Mama Nature gave ya with real botanicals.
Of course, it's
from
been P&G-ified somewhat, but the original idea, which it came from, was actually, let's create basically a Missy Elliott music video. And actually, while we were doing it in the UK, we had the Missy Elliott track, and then when it became more global, they couldn't afford it, sadly. So it lost a lot of its charm that way. But I think we would not have won the pitch or been able to push the language like this with a brand that has kind of so much heritage without her almost kind of leading the project in a way. The next one is that great client agency teams deliver great work. I've never delivered a piece of great work where the client has been not part of our team. You have to absolutely have each other's back. I hate this like adversarial or parent-child relationship that we have often with clients. They tell us what to do, we do it. Or you go back to the agency and you bitch about your client. You will never do a great piece of work if you're bitching about your client behind their back, right? But you can do amazing work if you work together, and really brave work. So this is a piece of work that we did for Bacardi, which I absolutely love. So they asked us, they were throwing a music festival in the Bermuda Triangle for Halloween. Kendrick Lamar, Ellie Goulding, and Calvin Harris were playing over 3 nights. There were only 2,000 people invited to this party. They were all influencers. Vice flew in a plane of cool skateboarding dudes and blah, blah, blah. And we were asked to do the global social part of this festival. So basically go there, take pictures of people on the beach, get them to say some stuff, what have you. And we knew that part of what we had to do was going to be that brief, but we had a really great relationship with the client. We said to the client, look, in our opinion, there is nothing more miserable than showing your core audience of middle American young men parties that they're not cool enough to be invited to. It's like, it's not fun, and it's also not interesting because everyone does it. So give us a small pot of money to do something from their perspective. So we reached out to a guy called Marcus Haney. He is a festival breaker-innerer. He's from California. He's got a really interesting group of friends. And he has made a name for himself, like breaking into Glastonbury, breaking into the Emmys, breaking into Lollapalooza with his friends in really audacious ways. And he'd just made a movie with MTV called No Cameras Allowed, where he'd been unmasked. And he'd been on, I don't know what, I'm not up with like who the US hosts are of the, like David Letterman, but he's been gone a long time, that kind of thing. So he'd done quite a lot of interviews and he'd been in the public eye. And we said, would you break into this festival for real? because it's important to him as an artist, you know, like a creator, that he does it for real. Would you break in for real? Bring all your friends down to Puerto Rico. By the way, the army is guarding the island. It's super dangerous. And the way that we invited him publicly and how we got kind of the following for the story was that the one tweet that Bacardi had paid Ellie Goulding to do, saying, "I'm at a party," we instead got her to challenge him to break in. So Ellie sent the message, "I dare you, you know, I've seen you break into a lot of stuff, can you get to the Bermuda Triangle?" And then we just had to let him go. And we didn't know how he was going to do it, what he was going to do, whether it was going to be illegal, legal, NDAs all over the place. He completely went dark. And it was absolutely terrifying. We might not get anything at all, or he might get killed, or whatever. But our client had enough trust in us, and we were really such a good team together that we managed to do it. And actually the result was, the result is a 24-minute made-for-TV film, which you can see on Vimeo actually at the moment. So as you can see, it was brilliant. He came dressed as Ellie Goulding. His friend came dressed as Dougie, who was her boyfriend at the time, hence the earring and the hat and what have you. The film itself is incredible. They ended up on the back end of the island, their friend in a wheelchair. They had to fold up his wheelchair and carry him on their backs, like over the top of the island to get into the back of the festival. It's a really exciting piece of content, but it's something that we never would have made unless the client and us were completely bonded, because they could have at any time like pulled the plug. And the final point is that great ideas are really fleeting, and I'm sure all of you have had amazing ideas that you've thought were brilliant, and then suddenly you see someone else has done them, right? It happens all the time. I think it's something in the universe. So when you see a great idea, you have to grab it and you have to nurture it. And there's an urgency about it, which is really, really important. And it's why a lot of great ideas die in the strategic process. If you're kind of sitting too long talking about something rather than making it, they often kind of fizzle out somewhere, right? So get out of PowerPoint, fuck meetings about meetings. Now is the time. Like, now is the time if you have a great idea, or you'll miss it. And this is a really simple piece of work that we did at the end of last year for Equal Pay Day. So for She Says, it came from a Mr. President team. This Mr. President team had this great idea that they'd been holding on to, which was burning in their pocket. And their idea was for Equal Pay Day. Basically, Equal Pay Day is the day where women effectively stop being paid in the UK. It's about November the 6th, right? So that you get, if you're a woman, 82 pence in the pound in the last year compared to a man. So the idea was to actually mint coins, which I know is kind of illegal, but make them just on the right side of legal, but like actual proper pound coins worth 82 pence, and to do a campaign around that. And when I heard the idea, I thought that's absolutely genius. But if we don't do it now, someone else will do it, or it'll fall apart. It's one of those like brilliant little thoughts that you have to nurture. And so we just jumped on it, and that involved getting everyone, getting everyone working for free, trying to figure out how to mint coins, me personally actually putting, some money in, Mr. President putting in, a whole lot of money itself into making the idea wonderful to get it out the door. And again, they're so beautiful, and it did so well, so we sent them out to 100 different influencers on Equal Pay Day to take a picture of, and they're these just like beautiful, incredible things, which hopefully will be good for the agency because we can, win an award, but certainly great for She Says, and certainly great for making a statement around the fact that women just aren't being paid. So I wanted to leave you with a quote, which is, an idea that's developed and put into action is more important than an idea that only exists as an idea, which is Buddha. But it's also, I think anyone creative will know that this is the absolute truth. An idea isn't an idea until you finish the idea and it's out the door. Having an idea having a great idea is really easy. That's why you see so many great ideas in books from students, right? When I'm looking at student books, brilliant ideas. The hard bit is the bit that comes after that, and that's making it come out the other end in exactly the same way. And because I really believe that, I spend a lot of my time just putting stuff out into the world, not only things like She Says and Can't and what have you, but also creative superpowers. So I think they're sold out downstairs because, apologies, I only had 5. But Creative Superpowers is a brilliant anthology of all sorts of creative people from all over the world, writing about how you can really hone yourself and kind of bring your creativity out through hacking, making, teaching, and thieving. And there's some really interesting pieces of work in there. It's like a conference in a book. You can get it on Amazon. I've just finished writing and publishing a children's book, which again is an anthology. So people like Cindy Gallop have written chapters, but it's for 2 to 5-year-olds. And it's a compendium of stories to encourage 2 to 5-year-olds to go out there and be trailblazers and be a little bit bolder in what they do. And I'm also in the midst of launching a podcast called Burst, which has been quite good fun. I'm doing it with a friend of mine from Wieden and Kennedy. And it's about how to hack yourself more creative in 20 days. So how do you get out of a creative rut? So we are speaking to 20 different interesting creative people not in our industry about how they get out of their rut. And then they give us a challenge, which is something that they do to get themselves out of the creative rut. We go do it Gonzo style, and then we come back and we talk about what we found. So that should launch in the next 6 weeks. So I guess kind of watch this space. We've had some really interesting, we've met some really interesting people, some very weird people. So I just wanted to leave you with a question. So how are you going to embrace great ideas tomorrow? What are you going to do tomorrow to make some of the things that have been going around in your head as creative people that you really believe in, that you really think are going to change the world, and do something incredible with them? Thank you.